Usually when we talk about a tool, we think of it as something entirely separate from ourselves.
Right.
Like think of a hammer.
Yeah, a classic example. Just an object.
Exactly. You pick it up, you drive a nail into a piece of wood, and then you put the hammer down. It performs a function, but it certainly doesn't change who you are.
No, not at all.
And for a remarkably long time, I mean, that is exactly how we thought about language. The prevailing wisdom treated it as this external isolated system of symbols that we just sort of pluck from a mental toolbox, use it to transmit a thought across the room to someone else, and then put it back.
Right, it was viewed as a totally separate, compartmentalized faculty of the human mind. The assumption was that you generate a fully formed thought in some abstract cognitive space, and then you just translate it into this external code called language to, get it out of your head.
Well, welcome to today's deep dive, because today we are tearing apart that entire linguistic toolbox idea. New research and synthesis in the field of cognitive linguistics show that language isn't just a tool you use to express your thoughts. It's the very architecture of your thoughts.
It really is. It completely revolutionizes how we understand the human mind.
Yeah, and our mission today is to explore how language and thought are inextricably linked. We're basing this on a fascinating excerpt titled The Evolution of Cognitive Linguistics, a deep dive into human thought. And we're moving far beyond the dry textbook definitions of grammar and syntax that, let's be honest, you probably slept through in high school.
I know I did before I actually got into the field.
Right. So we are going to look at how your physical body, the way you move through space, and your social environment literally dictate the shape of your mental models.
Because once you see how deeply embedded language is in our biology and our physical reality, you can never look at a simple conversation the same way again. It changes everything.
Okay, let's unpack this. To really grasp how language builds our thoughts, we first have to understand what we used to get so wrong about it. Because the history of linguistics went down a very sterile, almost mathematical path for decades.
Oh, absolutely. For a huge portion of the 20th century, the dominant approach was the formalist tradition. This was a school of thought that treated syntax, which is, the structural, grammatical rules of language, as completely autonomous.
Autonomous meaning, like, it operates independently of the actual meaning of the words.
Yes. Exactly.
Like algebraic formulas where X and Y don't actually matter as long as the equation balances.
That is a perfect way to look at it. The formalists treated the human brain almost like a biological computer processing strings of symbols. So in this model, the structure of the sentence was the star of the show.
Huh. Not what the sentence actually meant.
Right. Whether a sentence made logical sense or was completely nonsensical was totally secondary. All that mattered was whether it obeyed the rigid, underlying rules of syntax. They wanted language to be a clean, isolated mathematical system.
But, human beings aren't clean, isolated systems. We are messy, physical creatures.
Very messy.
And cognitive linguists eventually looked at that formalist model and called its bluff. They argued that you cannot separate the structure of language from meaning because meaning is the entire point.
It's the whole reason we communicate.
Exactly. We aren't computers crunching code. We are active participants constantly constructing mental models of the world. And the foundation of those models is our physical experience, which brings us to this concept of embodied cognition.
Yes, embodied cognition. It completely dissolves the artificial boundary between the mind and the body. It posits that our general cognitive processes, including language, are fundamentally anchored in our physical forms.
Like our actual bodies.
Yeah, the way our nervous system works, the way we experience gravity, temperature, spatial dimensions. These physical realities serve as the fundamental baseline for how we understand everything else in the universe.
So what does this all mean? Does this mean I can't fully understand a concept unless I have a physical bodily reference for it?
Well, it means that your brain is intensely efficient. It repurposes its oldest evolutionary hardware to process new, complex ideas. Think about it. Millions of years ago, our brains evolved to navigate physical space and manage our bodies.
Right, to survive in the wild.
Exactly. So when we developed higher reasoning, the brain didn't build an entirely new section from scratch to handle abstract thought. It hijacked the spatial and physical pathways. Look at how we describe emotions. When we talk about feeling happy, we say we are feeling up. Our spirits are lifting.
Oh, wow. Yeah, and when we are sad, we are feeling down or depressed.
Because physically, when we are healthy and energetic, we stand upright. We fight gravity. When we are sick, exhausted, or grieving, we literally slump down.
The brain takes that inescapable physical reality, gravity and posture, and maps it directly onto the invisible concept of emotion.
Yes, and it's not just a poetic flourish. Neurologically, we're processing emotional states using the very same cognitive infrastructure that we use to process physical elevation. The abstract idea is anchored to the physical sensation.
That is wild. But if our physical bodies serve as the scaffolding for our thoughts, how do we handle the truly massive, intangible concepts that we can never touch or see?
Like what?
Things like time, or justice, or morality. This seems to lead us straight into the mechanics of metaphor, right?
It does. And to understand this, we have to completely strip away our high school English class definition of metaphor. We usually think of it as just a literary device.
Right, like a novelist describing a sunset to make the prose sound beautiful, a flourish you add on top of language rather than the core of language itself.
Cognitive linguistics argues the exact opposite. Metaphor is not a decorative poetic device. It is a constant, subconscious cognitive mechanism. I go so far as to say it is the primary engine of human thought.
Really? The primary engine.
Yeah, because we literally cannot process abstract domains without mapping them onto concrete domains that we understand physically.
Let's ground this for a second. Take the concept of time. Time is completely invisible. You can't capture an hour in a jar or hold a minute in your hand. So how do we process it?
We map a concrete resource onto it.
Right. And in Western culture, that resource is money.
What's fascinating here is that we seamlessly, subconsciously treat time as a financial commodity, and it bleeds into every aspect of our communication. We talk about spending our time.
Whoa, yeah. We worry about wasting it.
We ask if a project is worth our time, or we say we invested 3 hours into learning a new skill.
We even talk about budgeting our time or running out of it. The vocabulary of commerce is entirely superimposed over the passing of the sun across the sky.
And we do this so automatically that we don't even realize it's a metaphor. We assume it's just literal truth. But the mechanism of this metaphor dictates our psychology.
How so?
Well, if your foundational cognitive map treats time as a finite resource that can be spent or wasted, you are structurally primed to experience productivity anxiety. You feel guilt when you aren't maximizing your investment of the day.
Because to your brain, doing nothing is functionally equivalent to burning cash.
Exactly. Imagine, by contrast, a cognitive mapping where time isn't conceptualized as a commodity, but as a flowing river or repeating cycle of seasons.
Oh, that's completely different. You don't spend a river.
No, you inhabit it. You experience it. The way you categorize and conceptualize the world through metaphor doesn't just describe your reality. It actively dictates how you experience that reality.
That is a staggering realization. The metaphor isn't just a label, it's the operating system. But if we are constantly overlaying these physical and concrete properties onto abstract ideas, how do we actually organize the physical world itself?
What do you mean?
Like, does the brain have a strict internal dictionary to keep everything categorized?
Well, for a long time, classical philosophy assumed that we did. The traditional view held that categories were defined by a strict set of necessary and sufficient conditions, basically a rigid checklist.
So to use a really basic example, the category of chair. Under the strict definition, an object must have a seat, a back, and 4 legs. If it hits all those criteria, it goes in the chair box. If it's missing one, it doesn't.
A very neat, all-or-nothing boundary. But cognitive linguistics dismantled this idea by looking at how humans actually behave in the real world. And this led to the development of prototype theory.
Prototype theory.
Yes. It argues that human mental categories do not operate with rigid, fixed boundaries. They operate with fuzzy logic.
Fuzzy logic, meaning we don't have a strict checklist in our heads at all.
Instead of a checklist, we have prototypes. We instinctively view certain members of a category as more central or ideal than others. They form the core of the category, and everything else ripples out from that core, getting fuzzier and fuzzier the further away it gets.
Okay, let's use the classic bird example, because this perfectly illustrates how bizarre our brains are. If you tell someone to quickly picture a bird, almost everyone envisions something like a robin, a sparrow, or a pigeon.
Right. A robin is an ideal prototype. It flies, it sings, it's small, it has feathers, it lays eggs in a nest in a tree. It hits every central feature our brain associates with birdness.
Wait, so even though a penguin checks all the rigid biological boxes of being a bird, my brain spontaneously downgrades its birdness because it's not the central prototype.
It absolutely does. A penguin is biologically a bird, undeniably. But it swims instead of flies, It lives on ice instead of in trees. It waddles upright.
It's kind of doing its own thing.
Right. So it exists on the fuzzy outer edge of your cognitive map for the bird category. Your brain recognizes it as a bird, but it takes a fraction of a millisecond longer to process, and you inherently consider it a lesser example of the category than a robin.
Why on earth would our brains evolve to use fuzzy logic instead of a reliable, accurate checklist? It seems like a downgrade in precision.
It's a trade-off for cognitive economy and speed. The real world is incredibly chaotic. If you had to run a strict multi-point checklist on every object you encountered before categorizing it, your brain would freeze up from processing overload.
Like a computer buffering.
Exactly. By using prototypes, your brain can make split-second approximations. It's a survival mechanism. Speed is often more critical than absolute taxonomic accuracy.
And this fuzzy categorization has massive high-stakes consequences in the real world. Think about the legal system. Say a city park has a sign that reads, "No vehicles allowed."
Right, a classic legal dilemma.
The central prototype of a vehicle is a car, a truck. Obviously, those aren't allowed. But what about a bicycle? What about a motorized wheelchair? What about a kid's remote-controlled toy truck?
The strict dictionary definition breaks down immediately.
Yes. Judges and lawyers spend their entire careers arguing over the fuzzy edges of these cognitive categories because human language inherently resists strict boundaries.
Our mental maps are incredibly fluid. They're constantly shifting and updating based on context and new information.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because if our mental categories are fluid and our metaphors are subconscious, how does all of this flexibility manifest in the actual structural rules of language? I'm talking about grammar.
Grammar.
Because we are taught that grammar is the ultimate rigid, unbending set of rules.
Yeah, we are conditioned to think of grammar as the police force of language. Just a set of arbitrary rules governing where commas go and how verbs are conjugated. But cognitive linguistics sees grammar not as a set of rules, but as an active tool for conceptualization.
A tool for conceptualization. Explain that.
Specifically, grammar functions as a mechanism for windowing attention.
I absolutely love that phrase, windowing attention. It implies that language is visual. Like, out of all the complex, chaotic things happening in a scenario, I am going to draw a window around one specific element and force you to look at it.
That's exactly it. It is entirely strategic. A speaker can intentionally select a specific grammatical structure to physically direct the listener's cognitive focus, almost like manipulating a spotlight.
It's exactly like a movie director's camera lens. If grammar is the camera, the speaker is the director. When a director films a scene, they aren't just passively recording objective reality.
Right, they make choices.
They choose a tight close-up to force you to look at a character's tear, or they use a wide shot to show you the whole battlefield, or they intentionally blur the background to hide a clue. Grammar lets you do the exact same thing with concepts.
And the clearest example of this cognitive camera work is the passive voice. In English, the standard sentence follows a clear, active sequence. Subject, verb, object. The dog bit the man.
So the camera is pulled wide. We see the actor, the dog. We see the action biting. We see the receiver, the man. The entire scene is in focus.
But an astute speaker can intentionally deploy the passive voice to completely alter that cognitive landscape. They can say, "The man was bitten."
Oh, wow. The camera just snapped to a tight close-up of the man. The dog is completely out of the frame.
Exactly. You have grammatically windowed the listener's attention away from the instigator of the violence. The actor has been cognitively suppressed, and this is rarely an accident.
No, I imagine it's very deliberate.
This grammatical choice is deeply tethered to a speaker's agenda, their perspective, or what they wish to conceal. Think about how often public figures rely on the passive voice during a scandal. Mistakes were made.
Mistakes were made instead of "I made a mistake." By simply rearranging the grammatical structure, they erase themselves from the scene of the crime.
It's a brilliant, if sneaky, tactic.
And the wildest part is the cognitive impact on the listener. When you hear mistakes were made, your brain literally spends less energy searching for the culprit. The grammar dictates the reality that the listener perceives.
It is a profound realization that grammar is not just about grammatical correctness. It is a fundamental mechanism we use to construct, manipulate, and negotiate reality with our listeners.
But as speakers are acting like these strategic movie directors, constantly shifting grammatical camera angles, suppressing actors, and directing focus, it means they must be hyper-aware of their audience.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the final critical piece of the puzzle. Language never ever happens in a vacuum. It requires deep, complex social context.
The formalists wanted to study sentences in isolation, right? But a sentence in isolation is practically meaningless. A single string of words can mean wildly different things depending on who is speaking, who is listening, and the social power dynamics between them.
We see this intuitively in how fast we adjust our register. You do not speak to a toddler the same way you speak to a police officer.
Yeah.
And you don't speak to a police officer the same way you speak to your best friend. Your brain automatically adjusts the vocabulary, the tone, and the grammatical complexity the millisecond it reads the social environment.
This deep social attunement, it has to be an evolutionary imperative. Humans uniquely develop the cognitive capacity to discuss displaced items, things that are not physically present in front of us.
Yes, we can discuss the past, debate hypothetical futures, or warn of unseen predators. We develop this not just to express ourselves, but to survive cooperatively. Language is a social survival tool.
So our brains have to be unbelievably skilled at parallel processing. We aren't just decoding verbs and nouns sequentially.
No, we are processing multiple streams of data simultaneously. At the exact same moment your auditory cortex is decoding the syntax, your brain is cross-referencing the speaker's facial microexpressions, their tone of voice, their body language, and the shared cultural history between the two of you.
That's an insane amount of data. And the ultimate, undeniable proof of this parallel processing is sarcasm and irony.
Oh, I love this part.
Right. If we were biological computers just processing formal syntax, sarcasm would break the machine.
Sarcasm is a phenomenal cognitive feat. It is essentially a linguistic hack.
Because if you analyze a sarcastic sentence formally, just looking at the dictionary definitions of the words in order, it means the exact opposite of what the speaker is trying to communicate.
Imagine you drop a tray of expensive glassware in a restaurant. It shatters loudly across the floor. Everyone stares. Your friend looks at the mess and says, "Well, that was a brilliant move."
If your brain only processed the autonomous syntax, you would assume your friend was praising your agility.
But because we run language and social context in parallel, we instantly catch the irony. The formal structure says brilliant, but the situational data, the broken glass, the annoyed tone, the shared knowledge that dropping things is bad, it completely overrides the literal syntax.
So the context is just as important as the words themselves.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it elegantly resolves one of the oldest debates in cognitive science, the war between nature and nurture. For decades, theorists fought over whether language was a hardwired biological instinct or a culturally learned behavior. Cognitive linguistics shows us that this is a false dichotomy.
They cannot be separated.
Language relies on our biological hardware, our physical bodies, our spatial processing networks, our neurological capacity for parallel processing. But it relies equally on our cultural environment, the specific metaphors our society builds, our shared prototypes, the social context that makes irony possible. It is the ultimate seamless integration of biology and culture.
Wow. This entire deep dive has completely dismantled the way I look at daily conversation. So as we wrap up, what I want you listening to take away from this is how brilliantly cognitive linguistics connects the dots of your human experience.
It really connects everything.
Yeah. The words you use aren't just inert labels you stick onto objects to identify them. Language is the intricate, dynamic bridge between your physical body, your complex social web, and your internal thoughts.
It reveals that our minds are vastly more integrated with our physical surroundings and our communities than the old, rigid models ever gave us credit for.
So going forward, I want you to really observe yourself. Notice the spatial metaphors you subconsciously use when you talk about your feelings today. Notice how your brain prioritizes a prototype when someone asks you to name a piece of furniture or a type of fruit. Pay attention to how quickly you decode a sarcastic text message from a friend without missing a beat. Every single one of these moments is proof of this breathtakingly complex system firing flawlessly in your mind.
This raises an important question, though, and it's where this field of study pushes us next. It's a challenge I think we all need to sit with.
Oh, what's the question?
If our language physically maps our abstract thoughts and our grammar strategically windows our attention, we must continually ask ourselves, how much of our perceived reality is actually shaped by the words we habitually use? The evidence suggests the answer is more than we could possibly imagine.
More than we could possibly imagine. That is a phenomenal thought to leave on. Keep an incredibly close eye on the metaphors you rely on and the grammatical lenses you choose to look through. You might just discover how your language is quietly, invisibly dictating the very reality you live in. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.